enjoyed it. So coming into the final session of the Seeds Impact Conference, we have got Kaitlin Dawson, who is going to be talking to us around food waste reduction and how her and others are leading these conversations around becoming food waste champions and reducing food waste in our society. So Kaitlin, welcome.
Kia ora. Thank you, Pete. I am conscious that everyone has had a huge day sitting behind the screen, staring, and probably your mind expanding. So grateful for those that are here and for those that will watch this in a future time. I'm really excited to be here, and I think this is a great conversation to round out your day because we're going to end with some really tangible takeaways that hopefully will inspire you to act in your day-to-day. So as Pete mentioned, my name is Kaitlin Dawson. I lead an organisation called New Zealand Food Waste Champions 12.3. And when Stephen asked me to speak on kind of the opportunities of food waste, I decided that I did not want to talk at a screen for half an hour or however long we had. So I've engaged some of the brightest minds working on this challenge that we have in Aotearoa, and I will introduce you to them in a few minutes. I might just give a really brief overview of why we're tackling food waste, what the challenge is, and the landscape here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and a little bit of it globally, and then dive into a really dynamic, open conversation on the ground efforts that some businesses in the room are making and that we can make as individuals. So New Zealand Food Waste Champions, the charity that I run, really we exist to progress Aotearoa New Zealand towards halving food waste by 2030. So this is in alignment with SDG, or Sustainable Development Goal 12.3, which you may be familiar with the SDGs. They were set by the UN and committed to by many countries 7 years ago, and we actually have 7 years to go until 2030. So we're halfway to hopefully achieving these, but we're not quite halfway to halving food waste, which is the one we're working on. So we really need to commit as a community, industry, and government. It needs all of us to muck in and to enact change. So our organisation has a group of leaders from across the food value chain. We've got 14 champions that volunteer their time to progress our kaupapa. We've developed documents like a food waste reduction roadmap for Aotearoa and informed government strategies and policy. We've recently developed the food waste definition for the Ministry for the Environment, and we're currently mapping the food waste sector to really identify all of the stakeholders that are working to change food waste in Aotearoa, and there's at least 150 of them that I've found so far. So the community and organisations really are taking the charge. And the reason we're mapping it is to really foster collaboration and ensure we're all pulling in the same direction, because like in many industries, in food waste, we can often work in silos and not be achieving as much impact as we could if we were working together. The reason we're working on food waste is because it is a problem globally. 40% of food that is grown never makes it to the plate. And that emits at least 10% of our global emissions, and that's just from food waste and landfill. That doesn't count all of the emissions that go into growing, harvesting, picking, packing, transporting the food, and getting it all the way to our fridges or to our plates. So we have to work on this. It's important not only for climate, it's important for our cost of living, and it's important for food security. Here in Aotearoa, at least 15% of people experience food security, even though we have enough food to feed everyone. We also lead a program called Kai Commitment, which is an agreement for larger food businesses to sign up to voluntarily reduce their waste, but importantly to collaborate on food waste reduction across the system. Voluntary agreements have been deemed the second best mechanism for a country to reduce their food waste by the World Resources Institute in the UN. And so that's why we've just received 3 years of funding from government to hopefully embed this as business as usual in these larger businesses and scale it so we can see this food waste reduction happen across the system. So we're doing that. Our initial 7 signatories are Fonterra, Countdown, Goodman Fielder, Silverfern Farms, Foodstuffs, Nestle, and AS Wilcox. And we're really excited about the change that we'll be able to enact through that program. I really am a big believer that business is a mechanism for change, and not for profits, but business has the way to change. So that's why I've invited 3 of our innovative small businesses who are change makers that are really shifting the dial on food waste here in Aotearoa. I think the challenge that food waste faces is that the system kind of holds it in place. So we really need the innovation and the courage and decent business models, like we're about to hear from, that will sustain themselves in order to achieve that impact. So that's enough from me. I've got some curly questions that I'm going to ask our panelists, but I would love to open it up to you. I'll keep an eye on the chat, so please pop it in there if you think of any questions. And I'm mostly going to let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves because they'll do it better than I. But I'm going to welcome Michal from Foodprint, Angus from Wonky, and Jenni from EatKinda. I'll pick on Michal to start us off, and then we'll kind of go around the panel to introduce yourself, what you do, and maybe what drives you to keep getting up in the morning.
Kia ora. Thanks, Kaitlin. Ko Michal tōku ingoa. So I run Foodprint, which is Aotearoa's food rescue app. So basically, we partner with local eateries to give them a platform to sell surplus and imperfect food for a discount to prevent that from going to waste. Kaitlin's obviously given you some of the horrendous stats around food waste, and it's pretty horrific. Our data shows that cafes, sort of eateries in Aotearoa, are throwing out around 1,000 kilos of food waste or of edible food every year. And that is about $10,000 worth of profit for those businesses that they are simply throwing in the bin. And so our platform obviously helps keep that food out of landfill, keeps it from emitting emissions, is that what you say? Emitting emissions, keeps also enables our customers to save money at the same time. We've been operating for just over 4 years. We're in Auckland, the Waikato region, Wellington, Nelson, and Canterbury. We are going to squeeze in one more new market before the end of the year, which is super exciting. And yeah, we're just keeping on going for it. So if any of you guys don't know what we do, please do now jump into your app store and look up Foodprint, give us a download, and you'll be able to save some food from going to waste in your local area soon.
Cool. Kia ora, thanks, Michal.
No worries.
Angus, please do give us a bit of an introduction and your spiel.
Will do. Thank you, Kaitlin. Good to see some familiar faces on here as well. Thanks for having me on. So I am one of the co-founders here at Wonky. I'm responsible basically my area in the business is looking after our growers and our supply chain, essentially. So Wonky basically is a subscription service. So what we do is we go and collect produce that's at risk of waste directly from our growers, bring that to our depots. We've got 2 in the North Island, box those, and then send them out to consumers. So we're a home delivery, essentially, we're a home delivery service that, as opposed to providing choice for our customers as to what they want, we provide them with what's available from one week to the next from our growers. We've been around just over 2 years now. We started in Wellington. We've grown the business to now 2 distribution centres in the North Island. We have still in Wellington, and then one also in Auckland. So Auckland's distribution centre basically services Upper North Island growers and delivers to Upper North Island customers. And Wellington will predominantly source a lot of our produce from Lower North Island growers and distribute to Lower North Island customers. So we're trying our best to actually, focus on keeping the food miles down and sourcing local as much as we can to either distribution site. So yeah, currently just in the North Island, very soon to expand into the south before the end of this year, in fact. But yeah, that's what we're doing. So we're essentially tackling this, I suppose, food loss piece in the food waste supply chain, which is at the production phase, as opposed to, say, the household side, which is I guess more of a consumer-based food waste problem. We're focused on reducing food waste at the source or at the farm. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. And I might just add there that while we don't have data in New Zealand about how much food is wasted across the food value chain, that work is underway by the University of Otago. I do often refer to Australia's stats, and at home we do waste the most food waste in terms of the whole piece of the pie, but the second largest category that waste is on farm, and it's not necessarily through fault of their own, it's through the market and not being able to sell that produce. So it's really great to see solutions like Wonky Box tackling that and getting food to people that want to purchase it, being able to remunerate our growers who have worked really hard on growing that produce, and getting it to customers. So awesome to see you'll be expanding down to my neck of the woods. Jenni, please do introduce.
Kia ora everyone. I'm Jenni, one of the founders of EatKinda. We are a plant-based ice cream company making dairy-free ice cream out of cauliflower that would normally go to waste. Our mission is to help the world differently, and we're trying to create a business model where every decision that we make is made for the environment, the people and the animals. We work with the growers at the moment, utilising the cauliflower, as I mentioned, that would normally go to waste. And what drives me is probably just the responsibility. Like being a business owner, I feel like it is my responsibility to make the decisions that are best for the planet, the people and the animals. And I'm also quite curious to see and if I can be a part of that change in the system. Oh, and we're just a startup. We've been around for, we've been growing this business for a couple of years, and we've just launched this year into Hell Pizza nationwide. And today I got our very first orders for Countdown, which we're launching in November. So it's a really exciting day today.
Amazing. Congratulations. That is it's a big task. So now I feel like we've already got 3 actions that people can take with these 3 businesses to reduce food waste and also access delicious kai. I'd love to dive into, not that I want to start negative, but about the challenges. No, we won't start with the challenges of business. I think that why might food waste and other kind of big systemic type challenges that we faced in this day and age, like the climate and cost of living and food insecurity, why might they need innovative thinking and business models like your own to tackle those? Why is that not just a responsibility, say, of government or some other bodies? Would love to hear your perspectives on that.
I'll go. Cool. So I want to start by saying, as Kaitlin said as well, we are in a cost of living crisis and a climate crisis, and there is simply no good reason for us to be wasting food. It is absolutely absurd that we are wasting the amount of food that we do, especially when we are being hit by these 2 enormous crises, or literally, on our front doorsteps. I think with these challenges, there's not one sort of silver bullet solution. We require lots of different solutions across different spaces of the food chain and other different sort of, I guess for cost of living, especially other parts of the economy, which I won't speak to because it's not my area. But I think that, the 3 of us sitting here today kind of represent people working at different phases and doing different things and just thinking about business and life differently, which is what we need to be doing as we transition into a green economy, and making sure that transition is also just. I think the other thing is that people often talk about our food systems kind of being broken. And I think that you could also apply this same sort of lens to the circumstances that have led to the cost of living situation. But I think that there's a lot of that narrative is moving more into that the systems aren't actually broken. The systems are working exactly the way that they were designed to work. It's the design of the system that is flawed. And so we really have to be rethinking things right at the top. We're kind of picking up some of the scraps at the bottom at the moment in a kind of way to help kind of lead that change from the bottom up. But we really do need that full systemic change to attack these problems.
Jenni, would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks, Michael.
I'd just like to add, I feel like we need innovative thinking. I feel like it's a crucial part to help solve the problems, because we can't rely on the government in policies like that, because it takes so long for change. And innovative thinking, there's a lot more flexibility, and the issues are quite complex, but it also needs urgent action, and that's where innovation can come in.
I agree. I also observed that if there's enough of that innovation and momentum, then that will push those other more framework type changes, policy type changes to act, because they see the movement and the demand taking place. That's what I hope anyway.
Yes, and if it starts on the ground with like-minded people like us and grows that way, I think is a lot quicker way than waiting for government to make the changes.
Yeah,
I would agree there too. I mean, I think it's so important to have startups and new businesses come in to this area and actually make a change, improve success in this space to, I suppose, in somewhat influence some of the bigger corporations and things to make some change themselves. I was at a panel the other night. A similar question was asked about how we can influence more of these larger corporations to sort of adapt more. And I think what we're finding is that, you know, innovate, like companies like Wonky, Foodprint, EatKinda, they're attracting some really, really good talent these days, often talent that have come from corporations and things like that. So we'll eventually, I think, with the success of these small businesses, you'll start to see larger companies and so on probably adapt a bit more. I think with some of the challenges like the cost of living and climate, for example, they have such an effect on produce, the space that we play in here at Wonky, because, you know, I think when people do talk about the cost of living, or when the media is talking about it, they're quite often talking about fruit and vegetables as well, right? Which are arguably, you know, the food sources that most people are needing most of the time in order to live a sort of stable, healthy, balanced lifestyle. And the thing is, I think with our solution, which is direct to grower, direct to consumer, we're removing so much of we're removing so many costs in the supply chain than what traditional avenues of getting produce would involve. So, you know, it's typical to see growers do what they do best and simply grow from their farms. You know, their produce would go to a pack house in most instances. From a pack house, it would then go to a wholesaler or a market, and then from those markets, it then, you know, ends up at a retailer or on the shelves in Countdown or New World and Faro and the like. And there's so much cost in that supply chain that is added on, ending up with consumer spending, you know, through the roof if they are wanting to buy fresh produce. Whereas with initiatives like Wonky, which, you know, removes so much of that supply chain, we're actually able to get produce fresher and quicker to our customers, and ultimately without too much of a cost for them, because we're removing so many barriers in that process. The climate, I think, is a really interesting one in our world here in produce as well, because the climate problems are really affecting the quality of produce. So, you know, we have had some really unprecedented seasonal weather events that have happened this year in New Zealand that have resulted in such a huge loss of produce. Not even just a loss of produce that we can't eat, let's say from the Hawke's Bay, from all those apple orchards, but produce that's grown in unusual seasonal weather patterns that meant that they haven't necessarily like made export markets because their specifications aren't quite up to scratch, or even local markets. For example, feijoas were a really good example. Earlier in this year, the feijoa season, I think the yield on feijoas for most growers was something ridiculous, like 50%. So there was actually 50% of feijoas grown in New Zealand this year that didn't meet retail standards, and that's purely based off, you know, these weather challenges that so many growers are facing. So it is important that we have startups, new businesses, new initiatives, and innovation in this space. Otherwise, we're just going to see more waste as a result throughout that supply chain.
Absolutely, and that speaks to that flexibility that Jenni mentioned. As the larger, organizations can't be as flexible when the size of fruit and veg changes, and that's not something that the systems are used to dealing with. Anne-Marie has asked a question about consumer education. Anne-Marie, did you want to speak and ask it, or would you like me to read it out? I'll read it out. It occurs to me that many people may not realize what is wasted and why, and if they did know, I feel they would be concerned. Is that your experience? Does anyone want to jump in on that?
Absolutely. I mean, like, that's one that we're quite pushy on, I suppose. Like, a huge part of what we do in our business is educate our customers on the why. So, like, this is what you've got coming in your box this week, and these are the reasons behind why they're coming in your box. This is why it hasn't met export standards. This is why it hasn't met sort of, the retail standards, and so on. And I think what we're seeing through a very engaged set of customers is some really surprised reactions from New Zealand households as to what, it's like, this hasn't been accepted. That's quite baffling, or yeah, and essentially that education piece is massive. And I think for all three of our businesses up here today, we all do quite well in that space to really explain why this is happening.
I think the government have noticed that too. I'll just mention that in terms of food waste reduction and the focus of government recently, they just invested 4.6 million in behaviour change for food waste reduction specifically. 3 million of that, or almost, went to consumer behaviour change education, which sits under the Love Food Hate Waste banner. So over the next 3 years, I do hope that we will see some really strong messaging and also collaborative messaging with other programs to actually really influence that understanding, because in my opinion, that education has to be met with the tools and the ability to say access Wonky fruit and veg through the likes of Wonky Box or wherever else they're able to shop, because education is important but not just enough. Michael, did you want to?
Yeah, I think like Angus has definitely raised some really great points there around sort of highlighting the issues and making food waste less acceptable in the world. I think in Aotearoa. I think I've experienced a lot of that sort of businesses, like really keen to get on board as well. But I think the flip side of it is, and sort of speaking to that behavior change piece, there's a lot of people, and I'm sure that the others have come across these sorts of businesses before, who are like, we've been doing things like this the whole, I've been in business for 20 years, we don't need anything to change the way we're doing it. And I've found that business owners don't like talking about food waste. It's kind of something that everyone likes to hide away and shy away from. It's a little bit embarrassing to admit that, you might be wasting food. And the other thing that we find with with eateries a lot of the time, and not all the time, obviously I work with a huge number of amazing eateries, but they kind of build it into their pricing. So they'll have like a percentage, we account for 10% daily waste, or whatever that number is. And so because we've already covered our costs and what we know we're going to sell, they just don't see or count that what is being wasted as being waste. And yeah, so sort of changing those like mindsets can be a real challenge at times. I recently presented to a large corporation, is probably all I could say. And I was like, look, this is what I myself have witnessed in one of your stores from one of your products going in the bin. And I scaled that up across the whole country. And this was just one product from a business that would be selling hundreds of different food items. And it was worth $7 million. And I can't even remember what the emissions of that was annually. And they just genuinely didn't care. And how we kind of communicate that, and the feelings of the people who I witnessed who were having to throw that food away as part of their job. And they were probably minimum wage, or if they're lucky, living wage, not anything more, I would assume. And they were pretty heartbroken about it, but they were like, we cannot give this food to anybody else because we will get in trouble for it. So there's a whole lot of sort of barriers and layers that we have to fight against to kind of change that systemic thinking, which is really challenging. I feel like I went off track from that question, but hopefully I kind of
I'm sure that was quite interesting to everyone. The reality is, whatever our system is built for is now costed into the system, and food waste is a part of that. Write-offs and damages is one part, but there are many other elements to food waste which is costed in. And ultimately, the question, what gets me up in the morning and to work with businesses is, if we tangibly, demonstrably reduce the food waste and therefore save money, could we bring down the cost of food? That's what kind of makes sense to me. But that's a big question that I don't yet have answers to, and I think we're on a journey to figure that out. But it's costed in at every stage, from the growers all the way to when we buy it or eat it. So, and I think that's why I'm going to go to what most panels and conferences talk about, which is collaboration. And it's what gets me so excited about what I do. I get to have lots of people with different opinions and different agendas around a table trying to work towards our common goal. So I'd love to hear from the three of you, and I might start with Jenni, on if you have collaborated on your journey, if you think it's as important for small businesses as for other conversations. Just love to hear your take on collaboration in general.
Yes, I feel like collaboration is extremely important. We have collaborated with a lot of people and groups with our startup. I don't think our success of where we are now would be without those collaborations. When you're small, I think if you collaborate with other companies and people, you grow in your knowledge and support and your contacts a lot quicker. And we collaborated with Wendy from Perfectly Imperfect in the beginning, and she's been a huge support, connecting us with cauliflower growers and helping us get the cauliflowers in. We've learned a lot about the food waste system through Wendy, and she's helped share our story on her platforms, which has grown, given people, like, it's just helped grow our network as well as us helping grow hers. And also we've collaborated with a packaging person who has helped us find, like, we're the first in Australasia to have 100% plastic free certified home compostable tubs. And that, like, without that collaboration, we wouldn't have found those tubs. So those are two examples anyway.
Anyone else have any reasons that collaboration is important or examples of it? I bring it up mostly because across the food system, I think waste happens at one end because of decisions made in another. So there's no way that only one area can influence the waste that they are dealing with.
Yeah, I would agree. You definitely, I would say, need multiple partnerships, multiple different, ways of influencing what you're doing. I think for us, like, I'll always remember how we met, funnily enough, with Michal very well before we were even sending out our first boxes, because we were very interested in what Michal was doing. And at that point in time, Michal was based down in Wellington, as were we. And, we caught up because we were just genuinely interested in the space that Michal was working in. And Michal at the time was part of a program in Wellington called Creative HQ, who offer incubator programs and things like that. And through meeting Michal and just getting on and explaining kind of what it was we wanted to be doing, she was very helpful in getting us into Creative HQ for our own incubator program. So even like just networking amongst kind of friends, if you like, from the space has helped us a lot. Hasn't necessarily meant that, like, we partnered with other food waste initiatives as such. I do see that being a possibility, but just like the network in general, the people involved in this space, they're very willing to help others join and get involved, which has just been, it was great. It was great for us.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay.
Everyone's very passionate in this space.
Yeah, and it was super cool to get to meet with Angus and Katie at such an early stage, and yeah, it's cool that they're now in Auckland with where I am as well, so we still can catch up regularly. I think you know, Foodprint is like really 100% based on collaboration. We are a marketplace, so we rely on eateries for our platform to work. So you know, there's hundreds of partnerships happening with Foodprint on a daily basis, which is really cool. And I think, as was just alluded to there by Angus and Katie as well, Angus and Kaitlin, the rolls off the tongue. The space I think is really really collaborative in Aotearoa, and you know, I was very lucky to meet with Tessa Vincent, who a couple of you know for sure, in my kind of early days, and she sort of got me involved in a couple of like online kōrero that happened on a, you know, semi-regular basis. And whilst a lot of the time I was really struggling with like, do I actually have the time to attend these, the networks that I've been able to grow and develop right across the country have been hugely helpful. You know, through that network, I met someone in Timaru, and we've just launched Foodprint in Timaru. And I met this guy online 2 years ago. And, you know, 2 months ago, I sent him a message saying, hey, Nigel, we're coming to Timaru. Like, what can you do to help me out? And so having those kind of networks and those people that are going to be your cheerleaders in their different regions is amazing. And I think the biggest thing with people in Aotearoa that I've learned is that people are so generous with their time. If you ask someone to give you some of their time, you know, be respectful of it if they do say no, but a lot of the time people will say yes. And again, that's like how I got connected to both Angus and Kaitlin on this call today. And yeah, so I think it is really important, and sometimes it can be quite like terrifying to put out that first kind of ask, but definitely do it. And then I think the other huge collaboration that Foodprint has just done is with the Auckland Climate Festival. Over the last month, we've done a range of events where we've hosted 3 panel discussions where Angus was one of our panelists there as well. And really kind of my objective of the events that we did was to highlight that Foodprint is just one tiny little piece of the work that's happening in Aotearoa in the food waste space, and that there's a whole lot going on, and that whilst we all have like this really common goal, and I kind of say that we're all like different puzzle pieces of the same puzzle, working away on our own little bits of the system to fix up the whole puzzle. Yeah.
Love that imagery. I might run with that in terms of being puzzle pieces. I would love to hear in as much transparency as you can muster about what one thing, if the food system and the system that we're in now could give you one thing to help your vision thrive, what could it be? And by this, I mean, you know, we've talked briefly about how smaller businesses like yourselves can ultimately influence larger businesses and corporations to make change. So it could be kind of in that world. It could be how you all connect with us as individuals, as eaters, as consumers, depending what label you want to give us. And it could be to do with the education or the access that we have to change our behavior at home, or it could be a bunch of money. I don't know. But I'd love to hear what, you know, you all have probably these grand visions for your businesses, for your enterprises, and for the impact that they'll have, not just your bottom line, but the triple bottom line. Would love to hear if you can name one or a couple of things that if it changed tomorrow in the kind of system that we're in, that your vision would be closer to being realized.
I guess I could, what I would say from our side is that if the food system was more reliant on what we have available rather than what we want, I think it would we as a nation would be better off, purely because the way the food system works here is that channels that buy produce and various other items like supermarkets and so on, they'll tell a grower what they want. Whereas where initiatives like Box fit in is we don't ask growers what we want, we ask them what they have available. And growers are continuously under pressure here in New Zealand because as consumers here in New Zealand, we've we're used to eating whatever produce we want, at whatever time of the year. So, you know, we don't eat within season. Don't know that we're not necessarily eating within season. We've just been brought up to expect whatever it is we want. So that is, it's not great for us as consumers, because we end up spending more at the till than we would like to, and we're often baffled, and we point the finger at the supermarkets and blame them, when in reality we should be, in some regard, a little bit more educated on seasonality and eating in season. Like, I think that it would help out a lot of New Zealand growers, because, you know, we wouldn't be putting them out of competition and focusing on sort of imports. And I think it would just create a much fairer level playing field for us, and then also New Zealand's food producers, if we were just a little more open to eating within season, and not being so selfish, I suppose, on what we want all year round.
Love that, connecting to seasonality. Michael or Jenni, got any big changes you'd like to wake up tomorrow and hear that it's happened? And
oh, look, the ideal world. There's an overabundance of food in this world, and from the last time I looked, there was about 700 million people hungry or starving, and yet we can feed those people. Like, there's enough food, and so my ideal world would be everyone wasn't hungry. But on a smaller scale, and in New Zealand, I think I'd like to wake up and know that every edible bit of food can go off our fields and be eaten or utilised in some way as food and not go to waste. Like, I know with the cauliflowers, the buyers buy them per carton, and they have to be a certain size to fit in that carton. So if you've got a carton, the buyers are wanting to see as many cauliflowers in there. So there's cauliflowers that are as big as your head that get left on the land, that are beautiful, they're white, there's no marks on them at all. They get left on the field because they're the wrong size, and that just breaks my heart. I think, like, and yeah, so I would love to wake up and know that everything's getting utilised and we're eating it all.
do you think there's a lot of barriers between this reality and that reality?
I have talked to the growers. I think there is a lot. There's financial reasons, there's safety reasons, there's storage. Like, I think we need to go to the growers and have big conversations and work with them to find solutions, and just spend that time listening to what their problems are, because they don't want to be seeing that food go to waste either, and not just for money reasons. I mean, it's the water used, it's the manpower growing it, it's everything. It's just really inefficient.
Absolutely. I think there's a few small pockets of solutions popping up, but making that accessible to growers who are so focused on obviously growing and getting the produce to the people that are buying it is their main priority. So again, that collaborative piece needs to come in.
But I think we also need to think the big picture too, with climate change and stuff like that. It's like, how does that affect our growing, and what changes need to be made to future-proof our food? Like, the insects are going to change. We're going to get, you know, like, the whole picture is going to change, and what does that look like, and what do we need to do to future-proof it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, I
Mike,
think, yeah, I think like Jenni just said, I'd love to have like a largely localized food system where everyone has enough to thrive. There's no one experiencing food insecurity, and there's no food being wasted. We're a long way off from my idealistic view. I think one thing that I really would love to see for Foodprint specifically in the next 12 months is for more of the large supermarkets to come on board. There has been an ongoing conversation. I think it kind of speaks to what I said in, I think, the first question about businesses being a bit like apprehensive to change. You know, we've got such a huge customer base now. We've got a model that has worked. We've refined our processes, overseas apps that do a similar thing as Foodprint work with supermarkets. And so, yeah, that's one of my key focuses, because that also enables, you know, a whole other sort of those food insecure communities to access Kai at a cheaper price as well, which is something that, yeah, I'm also really passionate about, and really aware that a lot of the stuff that we have on the app at the moment doesn't kind of fulfill that need, but that there is like another layer of Foodprint that we can support those people really doing it tough during this cost of living crisis.
Amazing. Some big goals. And we didn't even really talk about the role that technology might have to play in this kind of expanding and scaling accessibility, but while also keeping, respecting the locality and the need for solutions to be local, and growers obviously growing seasonally, and what, you know, makes sense up here doesn't make sense down here, and how can we reconcile those two differences? But we don't have time for that today, so that's for another time. If anyone else has any other questions, I'm getting the nudge. Then yeah, please pop them in the chat or unmute. But otherwise, I might do a quick fire round on your top tip for reducing food waste. And you can say, use my business or eat my cauliflower ice cream. But I think it's always relevant for people that are listening. We are all eaters. We all have a role to play in our food system, whether it be when we shop and prepare food for our kids and eat at home, or at our jobs, and, you know, encouraging workmates to do mini waste audits or whatever it is. I think we all have a role to play, and food waste is the low-hanging fruit I've seen. It's something that you can actually tackle one kind of, you know, pockmarked apple at a time. So your last final takeaway before we let all these good people end up their big seeds day.
Sure. Okay, from our side, I suppose we're you know, again, advocates for eating within season massively. I think stick to that. Stick to yeah, eating within season. Ensure that you're utilizing as much produce or each individual fruit, each individual veggie when you do eat them. I think meal planning is a good one as well. We share a lot of sort of recipes and food waste related recipes actually that utilize, you know, all of the produce that we're actually sending out in our boxes. And we actually also send out a lot of recipes that can sort of prolong the use of that food. So it's not just a case of being able to cook meals and have it that day. We're quite proactive in sharing ideas on how you can create recipes that will last you weeks. So yeah, I suppose be a bit disciplined around seasonality. Planning meals is always a good one, and using and utilizing as much of the veg as you can.
Awesome. Kia ora. Thanks, Angus.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Jenni,
I would,
Michael,
I'd also pick up on that, using the whole product as a real big one. So skins and stalks on fruits and vegetables still have really great nutrients in them. You know, and there's so much that you can do after you've got everything you possibly can out of it. Like I turn my citrus peels after I've like got the rind off, got the juice off, like the white bit that's left, I put that in vinegar, and that is like the best cleaning product I have ever used. And then if you're a meat eater, which I'm not, so kind of hypocritical, but being a real like nose to tail and not being kind of, you know, eating the whole animal, so whole animal or whole product. And then the other thing would be getting up close and personal with your freezer. Like if you've got stuff that's not looking like it's going to last much longer of the week. Like I had this with my Wonky box a couple of weeks ago. I was out way more than I thought I was going to be, and I had all this veg and it just like all went in a jumbo soup. And then now I've got, you know, soups for my lunch that I can just pull out of the freezer. So you can pretty much freeze anything. It's all good. And then ignoring best before dates, they're kind of a crock of shit. And of course using Foodprint.
Nice. Jenni, any final send-offs?
Just to add, which it's more, if you do have any scraps, put them in and you have a bit of land, make a compost and put them in the compost, or get a worm farm and feed your worms. So you're still so it just finishes that food system off nicely, and you're giving
rounds out the cycle.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I know running small businesses that are trying to change the world takes up a lot of time. So really appreciate your being here and appreciate everyone for joining. I would encourage everyone to jump on whatever socials you're on and follow Foodprint, Wonky Box and EatKinda because they are doing amazing things and deserve your clicks and your eyeballs. And we're all available on LinkedIn and what have you if you want to connect and ask any questions afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kaitlin, and Michael, Jenni, and Angus for really rounding us out, finishing us off with such a great, deep and important conversation around what is really quite a mammoth, wicked problem that we face. And I think you really helped highlight the importance of consumer behavior, business perception and practice changes, the fact that things are only going to get accelerated unless we take action and make these changes. And Michael, I loved your vision for a localized food system, no food insecurity and no food waste. I think what a great aim. So yeah, once again, and thanks for sharing your top tips. I know personally I learned a couple of things through that, such as using the whole product. I was like, nice one, Michael. And so we are very